Picture this, you're sorting through your old coin jar, and you come across a simple 1970 Washington quarter. Looks completely normal, right? Well, what if I told you that depending on what's hiding on that coin, it could be worth anywhere from $95,000 to $338,000? Yes, you heard that correctly. A quarter that could buy you a house. Let me take you back to 1970. The United States Mint was churning out millions of Washington quarters, just like they'd been doing since 1932. These coins featured the familiar profile of George Washington on the obverse and that iconic eagle on the reverse. Nothing special, right? Just another year of regular production at the Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco mints. But here's where things get interesting, because 1970 wasn't just another year. This was the year when one of the most significant minting errors in American numismatic history occurred, and most people had absolutely no idea it was happening. So what makes a 1970 quarter worth a fortune? The answer lies in something called a striking error, specifically what collectors refer to as a dramatic off-center strike or a broad strike error. But the real treasure, the 1970 S-proof quarter struck on a 1941 Canadian quarter. Now, I know what you're thinking. How does that even happen? Well, during the minting process, planchets, which are the blank metal discs that become coins, sometimes get mixed up. In rare cases, a planchet from a completely different coin, or even a foreign coin, makes its way into the striking chamber. When this happens, you get what's called a wrong planchet error. The 1970 S-proof quarter struck on a 1941 Canadian quarter is exactly that. A San Francisco-proof quarter design stamped onto a Canadian quarter. This creates a spectacular error coin that literally combines two different countries' coinage into one piece. Here's the thing about error coins. The value isn't just about age or silver content. It's about rarity, uniqueness, and the story the coin tells. When we're talking about prices ranging from $95,500 to $338,000, we're talking about coins that are essentially one-of-a-kind pieces of minting history. Think about it. The odds of this specific error occurring are astronomical. First, a 1941 Canadian quarter had to somehow make its way into the San Francisco Mint nearly 30 years after it was produced. Then, it had to end up in the exact spot where proof quarters were being struck. And finally, instead of being caught during quality control, which should have happened, it made it through and into someone's hands. This isn't just an error. It's a perfect storm of circumstances that created something truly extraordinary. Now, before you rush to your coin collection, let me walk you through what you're actually looking for. A genuine 1970 error quarter will have distinct characteristics. For the wrong planchet error, you'll see elements of both the Washington quarter design and the underlying Canadian quarter. The weight will be different from a standard US quarter because Canadian and American quarters used different metal compositions. The edge might show characteristics of the Canadian coin underneath the American strike. For off-center strikes, you're looking for a coin where the design is dramatically shifted, sometimes showing a blank curved section where the planchet wasn't fully engaged with the die. The more off-center, the more dramatic the error, and generally, the more valuable the coin. But here's a critical warning. Authentication is absolutely essential. At these price points, counterfeits and doctored coins are a real concern. Any coin you believe might be worth this much needs to be certified by a reputable grading service like PCGS or NGC. The market for rare error coins has been incredibly strong over the past decade. Collectors aren't just looking for old coins anymore. They're seeking pieces with compelling stories, with unique characteristics that make them stand out. And the 1970 Washington quarter errors check every single box. When specimens do come up for auction, they create serious buzz in the numismatic community. These aren't coins that hit the market every day. Sometimes years pass between significant sales. That rarity only drives the value higher. So here's my challenge to you. Before you dismiss that jar of old quarters sitting in your drawer, take a closer look. Check those 1970 dates. Look for anything unusual. An off-center strike, a strange weight, an odd appearance. Because while the chances are slim, the reward for finding one of these errors is absolutely life-changing. That humble quarter could be your golden ticket. If you found this valuable, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss our next deep dive into rare coins that could be hiding in plain sight. And drop a comment below. Have you ever found an error coin? I read every single one. There's something almost poetic about holding a coin that was born from chaos. The year is 1969, and if you know your history, you know this was a year of transformation in America. We put a man on the moon. Woodstock happened. The country was changing rapidly. And at the Denver Mint, amid all this historical turbulence, coin production was supposed to be business as usual. Millions of Washington quarters rolling off the presses, each one identical to the last, each one destined for cash registers and pockets across the nation. But the universe has a funny way of interrupting routine. Somewhere in that massive Denver facility, in the mechanical rhythm of dies striking planchets thousands of times per hour, mistakes were made. Beautiful, valuable, extraordinary mistakes. And today, those mistakes can sell for anywhere between $89,550 to $330,680. Let that sink in for a moment. A quarter from 1969 that could pay off your mortgage, fund your retirement, or change your financial situation entirely. What I love about the 1969 D-error story is that it reminds us that perfection is an illusion. The United States Mint, with all its precision equipment, its quality control measures, its decades of experience producing billions of coins, still managed to let errors slip through. And thank goodness they did, because those errors created opportunities for regular people to stumble upon incredible wealth hiding in plain sight. The Denver Mint struck over 114 million quarters in 1969 alone. That's a staggering number when you really think about it. Each coin was supposed to weigh exactly 5.67 grams, measure precisely 24.3 millimeters in diameter, and display George Washington's profile on one side with the heraldic eagle on the reverse. Standardization was the goal. Uniformity was expected. But in the world of minting, even the smallest deviation from protocol can create something spectacular. The errors that emerged from the 1969 D production run vary in type and severity, but they all share one common characteristic. They should never have left the building. Take the off-center strikes, for instance. These occur when the planchet isn't properly positioned in the collar die before the striking takes place. The result is a coin where the entire design is shifted, sometimes dramatically. You might see half of Washington's face with a curved blank area on the opposite side. Or the eagle might be partially missing, with the date and mint mark positioned in unusual locations. The more dramatic the off-center strike, the more collectors are willing to pay. A slight misalignment might be interesting. A 50% off-center strike is extraordinary. Then there are the wrong planchet errors, which represent some of the most valuable mistakes in all of numismatics. Imagine a dime planchet somehow making its way into the quarter production line. The quarter dies come down with full force, attempting to impress a quarter-sized design onto a dime-sized piece of metal. The physics alone make this fascinating. You get compression, distortion, and a coin that exists in a state of identity crisis. Is it a dime? Is it a quarter? Technically, it's both and neither simultaneously. These hybrid pieces of American coinage command premium prices because they're so incredibly rare. Double strike errors also emerged from 1969 D production, though finding one is like finding a needle in a haystack made of needles. A double strike happens when a coin is struck once, fails to eject properly from the press, and gets struck again, usually at a different angle. The result is a coin with overlapping images, ghosted designs, and a visual complexity that immediately announces something went very wrong during production. To the untrained eye, it might look damaged or counterfeit. To a knowledgeable collector, it's a prize worth pursuing. What makes 1969 particularly interesting from a historical perspective is the transition happening in American coinage during this era. The silver quarters had already been phased out by 1965, replaced with the copper-nickel clad composition we still use today. The mint was still adjusting to producing these new clad coins at scale. The process was different. The materials behaved differently under the dies. Quality control was still being perfected for this relatively new composition. All of these factors created an environment where errors were perhaps slightly more likely to occur than in previous decades. When you're examining a 1969 D quarter, looking for these errors requires patience and a good eye. Start with the basics. Does the coin feel right in your hand? Weight can be your first clue, especially with wrong planchet errors. A quarter struck on a dime planchet will weigh significantly less than a standard quarter. Next, examine the edges. Clad coins should show that distinctive copper stripe between the outer nickel layers. If the edge looks unusual, you might have something special. Then study the strike itself. Is everything centered properly? Are there any doubling effects on the lettering or images? Does anything look compressed or expanded beyond normal parameters? Authentication becomes absolutely crucial when we're discussing coins in this value range. The difference between $89,000 and $330,000 often comes down to the specific type of error, the degree of the error, and most importantly, the condition of the coin. A 1969 D quarter with a dramatic wrong planchet error in near-perfect mint state condition will command top dollar. The same error type on a coin that's been heavily circulated and shows significant where will still be valuable, but won't reach those astronomical heights. This is where professional grading services become your best friend. Organizations like PCGS and NGC don't just verify that an error is genuine. They provide a numerical grade that tells you exactly what kind of condition the coin is in. They also encapsulate the coin in a sealed holder that protects it from further damage and environmental exposure. When you're selling a coin worth 6 figures, having that third-party authentication isn't just recommended, it's essential. Buyers at this level won't even consider purchasing an error coin without proper certification. The market for 1969 D error quarters has remained strong and steady over the years. Unlike some collectibles that experience wild price swings based on trends and fads, truly rare error coins maintain their value because they represent something finite. Once these coins are discovered and removed from circulation, they're not coming back. There's no warehouse full of 1969 D wrong planchet errors waiting to flood the market. What exists is what exists, and as more collectors enter the hobby, competition for these pieces only intensifies. I've seen people dismiss older quarters because they think anything post-1964 isn't worth checking since it contains no silver. That's a costly mistake. The silver content of a coin is just one factor in determining value. Rarity, uniqueness, historical significance, and error status can all contribute far more to a coin's worth than its metal composition ever could. That 1969 D quarter you're about to spend on a parking meter might contain no silver whatsoever, but if it has the right error, it's worth infinitely more than its weight in precious metal. Every coin tells a story, but error coins tell the most interesting stories of all. They're evidence of human imperfection in a system designed to be flawless. They're proof that chaos can create value. They're reminders that paying attention to details can lead to discoveries that change lives. The 1969 D Washington quarter errors embody all of these truths in a small copper-nickel package that you could easily overlook if you're not paying attention to. So the next time you encounter a 1969 D quarter, don't just glance at it and move on. Really look at it, study it, compare it to other quarters. Because somewhere out there, in someone's change jar or coin roll or pocket, there's a 1969 D error quarter waiting to be discovered. Let me tell you about a coin that completely changed how I think about pocket change. It's 1994, and the Denver Mint is operating at full capacity, producing millions upon millions of Washington quarters. Workers are moving through their shifts, machines are running nonstop, and somewhere in all that organized chaos, something goes terribly, beautifully wrong. Fast forward to today, and that mistake is now worth a staggering $76,120 at the low end. But wait until you hear about the upper range. We're talking about $2,888,000 for a quarter from 1994, a coin that's barely 30 years old. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. How is that even possible? Coins from the 1990s aren't supposed to be rare. We're not talking about some ancient Roman denarius or a colonial-era coin that survived the Revolutionary War. This is a coin from an era when most of us were alive, using quarters to make phone calls and buy sodas from vending machines. But that's exactly what makes this story so incredible. The 1994 D quarter error isn't valuable because it's old. It's valuable because of what happened during production, and more importantly, because almost nobody noticed until it was too late. You see, the Denver Mint produced over 880 million quarters in 1994. That's not a typo. 880 million coins. They were everywhere. In cash registers, in piggy banks, in car ashtrays, jingling around in pockets across America. And hidden among those hundreds of millions of ordinary quarters were a handful of coins that would eventually become some of the most sought-after error coins in modern American numismatics. So what exactly went wrong? Or perhaps I should say, what went perfectly right for future collectors? The most valuable 1994 D quarters feature what's known as a double denomination error. This occurs when a quarter is struck on a dime planchet, or when a dime is struck on a quarter planchet. Imagine the confusion in the minting process. A small dime-sized blank somehow makes its way into the quarter press, and boom, you've got a coin that's trying to be two denominations at once. The dies come down expecting to strike a quarter-sized piece, but instead they're meeting a much smaller surface. The result is a coin with quarter imagery compressed onto a dime-sized planchet, creating something that shouldn't exist according to the Mint's quality control protocols. But the errors don't stop there. Some 1994 D quarters were struck significantly off-center, with the design shifted so dramatically that you can see the raw edge of the planchet. Others were struck on wrong planchets entirely, foreign planchets that had no business being anywhere near a US Mint facility. And then there are the broad strike errors, where the collar die that normally keeps the coin perfectly round simply wasn't in place, resulting in quarters that are wider and thinner than they should be. Each of these errors tells a story about a moment when the usually flawless machinery of coin production experienced a hiccup. And in the world of error coins, hiccups are worth their weight in gold. Actually, they're worth considerably more than their weight in gold. Here's what makes the 1994 D errors particularly fascinating from a collector's standpoint. These coins entered circulation. Unlike proof errors that might be caught before leaving the mint, these quarters went out into the world. Someone probably used one to buy a newspaper. Another might have gone into a parking meter. They were handled, exchanged, and spent just like any other quarter, completely unaware of their true value. Think about the journey one of these coins might have taken. It leaves the Denver Mint in 1994, gets shipped to a bank, ends up in someone's change after a grocery store purchase, sits in a jar for a few years, maybe gets rolled up and taken back to the bank, then makes its way into circulation again. All the while, it's passing through hundreds of hands, and not a single person realizes they're holding a coin worth more than a luxury car. The authentication process for these coins is absolutely critical, and I cannot stress this enough. When you're talking about values ranging from $76,000 to nearly $3 million, you better believe there are people out there trying to create fake errors or doctor genuine coins to look like valuable errors. This is why third-party grading services like PCGS and NGC are essential. They don't just authenticate the coin and verify that the error is genuine. They also grade the coin's condition, which is a huge factor in determining value. A 1994 D quarter with a dramatic error in mint state condition, meaning it looks like it just left the mint yesterday, is going to command a premium price. Take that same error on a coin that's been heavily circulated, scratched, and worn down, and while it's still valuable, it won't reach those upper-tier prices. Condition matters enormously in the rare coin market. The market for modern error coins has exploded over the past 2 decades. Collectors are increasingly interested in contemporary errors because they offer something unique, the possibility that you might actually find one. You're not going to stumble across a 1794 flowing hair dollar in your pocket change. But a 1994 D error quarter? That's theoretically possible. Unlikely, yes, but possible. And that possibility, that dream of discovery, drives people to search through rolls of quarters, to examine every coin they receive in change, to never look at pocket change the same way again. When these coins do appear at auction, they create significant excitement. Major numismatic auctions featuring high-grade 1994 D error quarters draw bidders from around the world. Serious collectors, investors, and institutions all compete for the chance to own a piece of modern minting history. The prices realized at these auctions often exceed estimates, sometimes dramatically, because these errors are genuinely rare in a way that even some older coins are not. So here's what I want you to take away from this. The next time you get a quarter in change, especially if you're anywhere near the Denver area where these coins would have first entered circulation, take a second look. Check the date. If it's 1994 and has that D mint mark, examine it closely. Is it smaller than a normal quarter? Does the design look compressed or off-center? Does something just look unusual about it? Because while the odds are very much against finding one of these errors, somebody has to find them. Why not you? The 1994 D Washington quarter error coins prove that treasure hunting doesn't require a metal detector or a trip to some remote location. Sometimes, the greatest treasures are hiding in the most ordinary places, just waiting for someone knowledgeable enough to recognize them.